Hey there, this is Brian Malouf and my dog Riley here again to give you some more tips and tricks from the studio. This series of videos is designed to detail some of the more important steps I take when mixing a song from front to back. And today we're going to take a second look at my mix template, today focusing on the effects returns, the bussing of those, and how they work for me in Pro Tools 11 for the offline bounce feature. So let's get started. I want to start today here with the lead vocals, and I want you to note that unlike most of the other stems that are straightforward, bass has got its own claps, percussion, and so on, just one for each. The lead vocals and backgrounds have two, a dry and a wet auxiliary, which in turn feed a dry and a wet bounce auxiliary. The bounces again are for monitoring and for offline bounces of individual stems. I'll remind you again too that the reason we have the second auxiliary labeled bounce is so that any processing that appears on the overall lead vocal auxiliary that all the tracks are fed to be recorded in the offline bounce, since the offline bounce will only record what is in the DSP cache. So right now, by instantiating this Kramer tape module, all of the lead vocals go to this module, are processed by it, and that in turn is recorded on the lead vocal auxiliary. So that's very important, or this piece of outboard gear, this plugin, will not be recorded in your offline bounce. Okay, why do I have a wet and a dry auxiliary for each of these vocals? Well, it's for the film mixers. When your song, the song that you've mixed, gets into a film, the filmmakers are going to ask you for stems so that the dub mixer can make an appropriate mix for the film. And they love to have the effects and the dry signals separate so they can make their own balance between the two. For my purposes, when mixing the record, I control both of those auxiliaries along with all of the other individual tracks with a VCA. The vocals are the only two auxiliary sets that I put a VCA on because when I make overall vocal up or down mixes, want the perspective of the dry and the wet signals to remain exactly the same. And I can do that only with this VCA effectively. So now you have to do a little math. If I want the vocal to go up by 1 dB, I would have to move this auxiliary VCA by 0.5. It went to 0.6, but it's really, I would adjust it further to make it 0.5. This is because you're adding both sets of gain stages together, the auxiliary stage and the individual track stage. Very important. Now let's go down to the effects returns, which I really wanted to get into today because for the same reason that I've modified a lot of my template to suit Pro Tools 11 offline bounce capabilities, I have rooted the effects returns in a very special and specific way to remain discrete with every instrument group. So rather than have a reverb that can be shared by the entire gamut of instruments in my mix and vocals, I have reverbs, delays, modulation effects, and multi-effects all routed to each individual group of instruments separately. There will be no drum reverb on my vocal tracks when I make a stem. Everything is discrete. Causes me to have a lot of buses and a lot of reverb returns. For that same reason, I don't generally put instantiations of delays and reverbs on individual tracks so that I can remain dry and wet in the vocal chain, and also so I can feed effects into one another from the return stage, something I like to do quite a lot. I always have, even in the analog days. I get my best effects when I feed one thing into another, and I like the routing capabilities that this format gives me. It sort of reminds me of a large format mixing console. So just going down further, you can see for loops I have 1 reverb, 2 reverbs, 3 reverbs, an effects bus, and in that sense can get anything I want onto a loops auxiliary fed back into its own group, and it will remain discrete. So this goes all the way down. You see I have more for lead vocals and background vocals than for anything else because they get the most effects usually. I like modulation effects. I like multi-effects. I like these modulation effects to feed into delay, to feed into reverb, and vice versa. So you can see I have some sends set up for those to accommodate quickly feeding one effect into another with many of my returns channels. If it's not already built into the template, I can easily add them as I go. So this makes for a very busy I/O, as you might imagine. And I'll let you take a real quick look at the bus I/O. Here they all are. Look at all these buses. Those are the main auxiliaries, and these are the returns for reverbs. Everybody gets his own. Everything is discrete. Everything is one button press for bouncing. And as a result, I'm using 254 of my 256 bus allotments. But it's worth it because it keeps my workflow very quick and very streamlined and very, very efficient. So that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week and we're going to start to process some audio. Take care and we'll see you soon.